Welcome to this edition of Valor Media. This is episode number 61 for April 5th, 2021, and I'm your host, Mark Appenzeller. And today I want to start off with a really simple question for you. In the course of going about whatever your business is, have you ever said to yourself, I could do so much more if I only had fill in the blank? That's your choice, and it's multiple choice, and there are a billion choices. But I would hazard the guess that if you're like most people, you probably would fill in that blank with the word money. And I think that's a shame. It seems like an easy answer, and it seems like the easy way out. As you go about doing whatever you do in your organization, your company, the agency that you work for, the nonprofit, the church, it always is tempting to think that resources are the solution to everything. Now, I'm not knocking resources, and let's face it, in the year 2021, we have some astonishing tools to work with. But I think that the important thing that we always need to remember is that they are just that, tools. And that's what I wanted to talk about today in an episode of Valor Media, which falls into our Valor XL series, where we share strategies with you to help you thrive in business. Now, the idea of resources is one of those things that you have to really struggle to find a happy medium with. Now, I've commented before, with me, I am very much a techie, but I am not somebody who chases technology. I kind of approach it with a little bit of healthy skepticism. And the reason for that is I think many times there's a lot of technology that gets rushed to the marketplace. Somebody will develop something. They'll do enough testing with it to get it to where it's workable, but sometimes it still has bugs in it. Sometimes it's not quite the wonderful thing it's presented as in the accompanying advertising. And it takes field testing, playing with it, using it, actually applying it in business settings until it finally begins to sink in that, well, maybe this needed a little bit more development. Now, a lot of times it requires that in-field experience for something to be modified. And that's why we see revisions. We see additions of products 2.0, 4.0, and it can be anything. Maybe it's hardware, maybe it's software, maybe it's an appliance, maybe it's a car. Whatever it is, there's always something that we see as the next big thing. And in a business setting, if it's something that specifically is tailored toward getting things done, we can fall into that trap that tells us, get this and it will solve all of your problems. But you and I both know better. It's never that easy. And yet, unless we're careful, we can con ourselves into believing that it is, and we can find ourselves falling into that trap over and over and over again. Now, I'm titling today's episode, The One That Got Away. And the reason for that is I wanted to just touch for a moment on what happens when we get that balance a little bit off in looking at the technology, the products, the tools that we choose to utilize in whatever our business pursuits are. Now, again, I am not knocking technology, and I do love technology. I'm a musician. I have a small recording studio in my house, and I really, really enjoy seeing what can be done with the technology that we have at our disposal today, and it's pretty remarkable. And I certainly have all kinds of gizmos and gadgets, but I don't rush out and buy something the minute it's released. I tend to be one of those people who does a lot of research. I want to see what kind of experience other people are having. And so before I purchase anything, I'll do some digging. I want to see comments. I want to see feedback. And I also like to look at things over a period of time. Because like I said before, sometimes things get released and they don't necessarily have all the bugs worked out. They're not in their most definitive form. And I'd rather let somebody else do the test drive. I might come back 6 months later and maybe there's been some adjustment. Maybe things are tweaked a little bit. And my experience as the end user will be a whole lot happier based on the fact that I waited. When I do finally buy something, I really, really come into it with a high confidence that, yep, this is what I need. This is a very seasoned decision. Now, I don't cheat my way out, but I also don't necessarily gravitate toward the most expensive thing. It is true to some extent that you get what you pay for, but that's not always the case. And sometimes you can invest a lot of money in something and discover that a more cost-effective alternative might have done the job just as well, or surprisingly enough, even better. So I try to find, again, a happy medium, a balance that takes all of the available information into consideration and helps me go in a direction that I have a pretty high probability of not regretting. So what do I mean by the one that got away? Well, invariably, if we get out of alignment, if the calibration gets off in how we assess what we need to do business, what ends up happening is we lose our focus, because our focus should never be on what we think the next big thing is. Our focus should always be, first and foremost, on our mission, that thing that we started to do business for in the first place, and also our vision of where we want our business to grow. We can't simply sit back and say, this is what we do. If we limit it just to that, then 5 years from now, we'll still be doing the same thing. We need to fully understand how to do what we're doing, but we need to be intentional about ways to see it morph and develop and become something far greater than what it is today. That is the whole idea of a vision. Now, in the middle of all of that, we have to utilize technology. But many times, I think businesses and companies and churches and agencies, they lose that calibration and they find themselves focusing no longer primarily on their mission and their vision, but on the technology. And the great danger there is technology never says no. It wants to draw you in. It wants to become what you focus on. It was designed many times with bells and whistles to make it more appealing in the marketplace. And when we buy it, we suddenly discover, wow, there are a lot of moving pieces. Now, sometimes we can end up buying something that has a lot more features than we will ever need, and it doesn't really make sense. It doesn't make sense to invest in something that was tailored for an organization of 500 people if it's you and 3 other people sitting in an office. Chances are pretty good that 95% of what's in that package will never be used by you. And you'll drive yourself crazy weeding through technical manuals trying to figure out what you want to do. So today I wanted to encourage you to be extremely intentional and very watchful when you investigate technology. Because what I mean by the one that got away is invariably you will discover that you lost a golden opportunity in whatever your business is if you took your focus off your mission and your vision and put it on your tools. Remember that. Back at the very beginning of this episode, I talked about how many people will say, if I just had enough money, I could accomplish this, this, and this. But even money is a tool. And if you focus on money for the sake of money, you've completely missed the point. Money is useless, even if you have a lot of it, unless you're using it properly. You have to use it in a way that's responsible and prudent. You don't want to waste it, and you don't want to just buy something because you have enough money to do so. But sometimes I think in business settings, we kind of fall into that trap. And maybe we sort of guilt ourselves into doing it because we look at the agency across town and we realize, wow, they have this really cool, and there's that question again. Do we really need it? Maybe it works well for them, and maybe it would be great for us, but what do we need? We get caught in the trap of trying to keep up with the Joneses. But if our last name isn't Jones, who cares? Let the Joneses do what works for the Joneses. If we're the Smiths or the Johnsons or the whatever, that's all we need to focus on. What makes sense for us? Now, one of the things today, too, is that particularly over the period of the last year or so, we've seen a pretty monumental shift in the way many businesses operate. And for some businesses, It was a smooth transition to go from face-to-face interactions to a lot of virtual business dealings. Platforms like Zoom have played an incredible role in allowing businesses to continue to operate or to operate in a different capacity. Unfortunately, not all businesses were able to make that adaptation smoothly. If you were used to doing everything manually, doing everything in a face-to-face setting, and you never investigated technological alternatives, unfortunately, you may have got a little bit left behind when suddenly people were forced to do business in a different way. Now, maybe you find yourself there today. Maybe you really feel like the last year or so has pulled the rug out from under your organization or business. But don't fear. It's never too late to get recalibrated. And I want to give you some very basic advice and hopefully inspiration today to help you to do that. Many, many years ago in the early 1980s, I discovered, probably around 1984, the advent of the compact disc. And at the time, my brother used to get an electronics catalog from a company that did incredibly detailed reviews of new products. They weren't simply selling you something. They were really giving you a detailed background about what its benefits were, what you needed to do to start using the product, what you should learn to get the most out of it. And that was my first exposure to compact disc players. Now, I didn't buy one back then, but I remember in 1984, I started reading about compact discs. I wound up not getting my first compact disc player until 1988. But for about a 4-year period, I saw this really interesting transition taking place because CDs were everywhere and everyone was completely blown away by this new technology. Now, I was somebody, being a musician, who had a pretty large vinyl record collection. Well, when I finally did get a CD player, and I got my first CDs, I was very much caught up in that craze of this is the new direction. This is the wave of the future. And like many people, I started selling my vinyl collection because I wanted to invest in CDs. CDs were the way to go. In the late 1980s and early 1990s, that was kind of what was being forced on the consumer in the marketplace. Vinyl was dead. Cassettes were passé. CDs ruled the roost, and you couldn't even hardly find a turntable anymore for sale. So when I was parting with the vinyl back then, I thought, well, this is really a prudent thing to do because I'm investing in the future. Well, the sad thing is, many, many years later, I really lament the loss of a lot of those beloved old albums that I wish I still had. And the CDs that I invested in, when I go back and listen to them now, I think a lot of them sound really terrible because the compact disc technology in the early and mid-1980s left a lot to be desired. One of the things that the engineers of the time hadn't really taken into consideration was the fact that when you listen to music in an analog medium, whether it's vinyl or cassette tape or reel-to-reel tape, you're actually hearing a lot of warm overtones and subharmonics that are a byproduct of the fact that it is an analog format. And when you convert things to digital, you lose a tremendous amount of that signal. When I go back and listen to CDs that were mastered in the 1980s, a lot of them to me sound really tinny and brittle and thin. And a lot of that warmth that I really loved from vinyl records is just not there. Now, as time went by, the technology improved, and there were a lot of softwares that were developed to address that. I even have a software in my recording studio where I do record digitally that enables me to take a digital signal and run it through the same signal path that you would have encountered in a 1960s era reel-to-reel tape recorder. So the software actually introduces noise at a very subtle level into this digital recording. You don't perceive it as noise. You perceive it as a warm, soft, rounded tone that simply wouldn't be there if it was just in the digital format. Pretty weird idea, huh? But the lesson I learned from all of that was I really wish I hadn't rushed into a new technology a long time ago just because that was the flavor of the day. Now, I still have a ton of CDs and I still play them in my car, and I'm not going to throw them away. But I wish I had my vinyl back. And amazingly enough, no one would have ever dreamed this in 1986 when CDs were saying goodbye vinyl. But vinyl has enjoyed a tremendous renaissance. And now there are a lot of current musicians who, when they put a new album out, release it on vinyl, along with digital and streaming formats. The lesson in that for us in whatever our businesses are is that you can't focus so much on a technology that you forget why you're doing it in the first place. And sometimes we do get caught up with the bells and the whistles and the flashing lights. Don't ever sell yourself short on what you can do based on what you can do. And if you do invest in technology, try to do it as wisely as you can, remembering that at the end of the day, it really is just a tool. Now, maybe it's a tool that you need, but maybe you don't. And I want to encourage you to really look as deeply as you can at how you do what you do so that you can make a good decision before you invest in something. Today, there are many legal, free softwares that might just get the job done for you. They exist sometimes as shareware. In a lot of instances, there may be something where a developer will give you the product free of charge but would like you to donate. And then in many other instances, they are truly freeware. So be sure to check things like that out as well. Don't be afraid to talk to colleagues, maybe even in other businesses or organizations, to find out what they're doing, what they're using. Maybe that wonderful thing they just bought turned out to be more of a headache than they ever hoped it would. In the end, it really comes down to understanding the best and smartest way to work. And at Valor, we'd like to help you to understand whether or not you are working in a way that truly is smart. We like to think that all the work we do is smart, but the reality is it doesn't automatically happen. We have to be intentional about working in a way that's smart. At Valor, we have a division called Valor XL, which is really about us taking our knowledge base and disseminating it in a way that's beneficial to other organizations and businesses. We can help you, too. Maybe you're struggling right now, not sure what the answer is. Maybe the answer is technology, but maybe it's just taking a deeper look at the way you do what you do. If you would be interested in finding out what Valor can do for you, please reach out to us at info@valorxl.com, and someone from our staff will get in touch with you, and we can discuss in detail with you a variety of options where we can help you to analyze what you're currently doing and determine whether or not you really are on the best possible path. Please check out our website, www.valorxl.com, and you can visit us on Facebook at Valor XL and also at Valor Ministries. We really want this podcast to be beneficial to you. So if there are topics that would be of particular interest to you or very helpful for where you find yourself right now, please reach out to us at media@thevalorcenter.org. I really encourage you to subscribe to or follow this podcast. We publish a new episode each Monday. They fall into the categories of Valor XL, where we share strategies to help you thrive in business, and also Crisis to Thriving, which is geared toward helping you really live an abundant life. And if you find yourself in a place of personal crisis where you're really struggling and aren't sure what to do next, you can reach out to us at info@thevalorcenter.org, and someone will get back in touch with you to let you know about a variety of programs available through the Valor Crisis and Training Center. I also encourage you to check out a recently published book by our executive director, Lori Riston, called You Were Made to Thrive: 7 Strategies to Move You from Crisis to Thriving. It's available on Amazon.com and at www.valorxl.com/products. If the Valor Media podcast is a benefit to you, would you consider financially supporting us so that we can continue to bring you this kind of content? If so, you can make your tax-deductible donation securely online by going to www.thevalorcenter.org/donate, or you can send a check or money order to Valor Ministries, 324 East Antietam Street, Suite 104, Hagerstown, Maryland, 21740. I'd like to thank you for spending some time with me today, and I encourage you to please visit us again next week for another episode of Valor Media. Until then, remember this: you were made to thrive.